Welcome. I'm Frank Conkling of Panda Consulting, and this is the Panda Consulting Deep Dive Workshop. And today we're going to talk about cleaning up your data. So this is, even though it is a deep dive workshop, we're going to cover most of the things that Pandas does when we're cleaning up data, but it's not going to be as exclusive as or as comprehensive as it might be. There's things we just can't cover in an hour, even an hour and a half. But what we're going to talk about is just sort of what could you consider dirty data? And this doesn't have to necessarily do with the parcel fabric. This could just be any regular GIS data. And we're going to break it down into three different groupings. The first grouping is going to be the geometries. What do you consider dirty data as it relates to geometries? And we'll show you a couple tools that you can use, and we'll demonstrate them and show you how to utilize them. The second grouping is attribution. And we're going to go over a couple things in there, how you go and clean up some of your attribution or do some checks on it to see whether or not you've got valid attributes in there. And then finally, it's going to be topology. How do you go and check for topology? How do you go and clean it up? Interesting, you're going to find that some of the cleanups on the topology issues that you might have are actually cleaned up in the geometry section more so than standard topology tools. We have found that in many instances, some of the new ArcGIS Pro adjustments tools and some of the cleanup tools are so efficient that let's put it this way, they're more efficient than the topology fixes that are included in here. So let's talk about geometry and a couple of tools that we'll use when we're going in and evaluating data. The first one is repair geometry. This is one that a lot of people, if their data never changes the place in which it's stored, they don't think about this a whole lot. But it turns out that within the GIS data structures, as you're doing manipulation and editing it and changing it, and even just doing something as simple as doing topology, it actually changes geometry and will often create elements that aren't 100% correct. I'm going to talk about repair geometry and show you how to do it. The second thing is symbology, to see if there's a way that we can go and identify, at least on a visual standpoint, where there might be issues with your data. And to help with that, we're going to actually demonstrate the simplified by straight lines and circular arcs that are in ArcGIS Pro. This is a really nice tool. And then we're going to talk about the shape area field and how you can utilize that to identify slivers and things of that sort. And then finally, we're going to talk about align features. So let's start. And I have here just a blank ArcGIS Pro parcel, or excuse me, just an ArcGIS Pro project. And I'm going to go and pull in a feature class, and this is a polygon feature class, nothing special about it. I can tell you this was a shapefile that was pulled from a county where they had submitted this data, and we're looking at it. And when you first look at it, at this level, it doesn't seem to be much issues with it. But I can tell you that shapefiles especially are problematic. And what you want to do is, if you want to check the geometries of this every once in a while, is you want to go to your geoprocessing pane and do a repair geometries. Sorry. Repair geometry. Now, what is that repair geometry is actually going to do? It's going to go and determine whether or not there is, and let's look at our help here just for this. Repair geometry is going to go and look at to ensure that there's, for example, that the server geometry are correct. It's going to remove any null geometries. It's going to look at short segments, going to look at incorrect ring ordering. Turns out the way that polygons are stored inside of the GIS structure is using a ring geometry, and it's going to determine whether or not they're in the correct order, clockwise or counterclockwise. It's going to look for incorrect segment orientation, self-intersects, unclosed lines, empty parts, duplicate vertices, mismatch attributes, empty z-values, those sorts of things. This is a really helpful tool. It does all validation in place, meaning it doesn't create a copy of it. It just fixes it right there. And I'm going to go and run it. This county has somewhere around 15,000 parcels in it. So 15,000 polygons in it. So just to give you sort of a hint on how long it actually takes, it's done. And if I look at my details, it will give me a list of what it actually did in here. In this case, I'm not going to look at it, but just I'm going to go in here and make sure that it's valid. If I want to go and check it, I can go in here, and instead of doing a repair geometry, I could do a check geometry on here for this same thing. And the check geometry would actually create a table listing all these. Not interested in it here, just interested in cleaning it up. All right. So I'm happy with that. It's something that I think we've cleaned up and made sure that those geometries are correct. It really doesn't move anything. It just goes and checks to make sure that the geometries are valid in here. So when would you have an issue with this? Well, again, shapefiles are infamous for this, but also any file-based data storage is infamous for it. In that, with SDE, when you go and import your data, it does a check geometry on it, and it actually goes and will give you warnings if you've got any of those bad geometries, self-intersecting, null geometries, multiple points, so multiple vertices. It will give you errors on them. It checks when it comes in, but it doesn't check when it goes out. It just writes out whatever is in there. So it's something that we tend to do, especially anytime we're going and taking somebody's data to bring it into a parcel fabric. The first thing we do is we always run repair geometry on it. The next thing we do is we'll go and we'll look at this and say, well, what does this look like as far as a vertices on it? And I'll go and I'll symbolize this by going to the properties. And you've seen me do this dozens of times now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a marker set for the vertices. So I'm going to go to my structure first, and I'm going to tell it to create a new marker layer on top of this. And then I'm going to go to my layers, and on that marker layer, I'm going to change the color of it, maybe make it red, change the size of it, put it down to something that's a little bit more manageable. And then I'm going to change the marker placement on it to vertices. I'm also going to turn off my solid fill color. I don't need anything filled. This will show me where all the vertices are on here. And from this, I'll be able to go and interpret, for example, on here, whether there is an interim vertex or not. Here, looks like there's an interim vertex here and possibly here and possibly here. These vertices are caused either by topology during its process of cracking and then clustering and validating, because when you have topology and you have another feature class that intersects it that's included in the same topology, it goes and inserts a vertex anytime there's an intersection of that sort. Or it's caused by curves. And these curves may have come from, this is a shapefile, so it has densified curves on it. And I'm going to want to go and clean that up. So that symbology, again, for polygons, all you have to do is insert one marker set. For line feature classes, you want to go and create two marker sets, one for the extremities, for the ends of the line, and another one for the individual vertices on top of there. I find it interesting that I understand that ArcGIS Pro 2.9, Esri has actually built in a little display thing where it will create a display layer showing you symbols on these vertices rather than just having to go in and manipulate the symbology on it. But it's simple enough to do. You don't have to do much with that once you understand how to do it. So let's go back here now and look at this simplify by straight lines and curves. This tool is going to go and analyze the features that I go and tell it to look at. And this does go and respect if you have a selection set on here, if whatever you might have on here. So in this case, I only have one layer. I have a polygon layer and put it in there. But you can see that I can actually add multiple layers and have them all analyzed at the same time. By the way, let me stop right here. And anyone that has any questions, please go ahead and put them over in the chat window. Chris is here. He's going to go and moderate and watch them and make sure that I'm aware anytime there's any questions or anything that somebody wants me to dig into a little bit deeper. So this simplify by straight lines and curves, again, works against multiple feature classes. It works against a selection set or all features in a feature class. And you can utilize multiple feature classes in here. I could actually call up a feature class from another, that's not loaded into my map document just by clicking on here. And then we have the maximum allowable offset. Now what this is going to do is it's going to look for multiple vertices appearing within that feature. And this is the maximum allowable where it can be offset. Let's actually pull up the full help file on here and show you how it actually works. So the maximum allowable offset here is the distance that it's allowed to be offset before it actually matches and believes that it's some sort of a curve in here for producing curves and replacing them with straight lines. There is a fit to segments where you go and describe what this is. And this modifies it. It's the create circular curves. I'm going to go and set that and just give you some indication that you can have these input lines and you can tell them the maximum angle that it will produce, and it will not produce anything above that. So this is where the maximum angle is less than 90. So in this case, it would not produce one there. But if I set it at more than 90, it will set it there. And as you're going to find, sometimes you have to experiment with this just to make sure where it's going to be. But the offset I'm going to start with, I'm going to start off with something small, maybe 0.1 feet on here. I'm going to tell it to fit to vertices. So use the vertex to determine whether or not there's any curves and how it's all fit in there. I'm also going to tell it to create circular curves. My maximum angle step, I'm going to make it 20. I'm not going to set a minimum radius or a maximum radius. We'll often go and do that so that these long radial curves, we can determine how far to go out with them or and such. And I'm going to leave it just at that. And I'm going to tell it to go ahead and run this. But again, this is maybe 15,000 polygons in here to go and run. And you can see the speed at which it's running. So Esri, I have to tell you, has made some really nice improvements in this tool over the last couple of releases on here, to the point where it can go and work against line features, it can work against polygon features, it can work against multiple feature classes at the same time. The older version of this that was in ArcMap was just called curves and lines add in, and it would only work against line feature classes. Now this works against both. So if you noticed right here, and let's do an undo. I didn't want to undo all the way to there. Nope, since I don't have that, I just told it automatically to write it. But it would go and it took all of these individual discrete short lines. And because I told it to go in and use this small allowance here, it went and migrated them and replaced them all with a densified curve. Let's see if there's another area in here. Yeah, it looks like it did that here and here. It did not do anything here, but that's all right. Also, we've got some multiple vertices in here with lines that may or may not be representative of a curve. And that's where it gets a little tricky, is that with some of this data, because it is digitized data in here, you can see where there's one segment was digitized there, and then another one there, and then here, and then it was offset to create this road right away. You can't always tell if these were supposed to represent curves or not on them. Here's an area down here. If we look at this, that probably is a curve. So we can use this again to go and try to identify these areas, and maybe there's a different setting in here that we might use. So I'll collect those, and maybe I'll bump it up to 2 feet, and I'm going to enable undo here to go and see if that makes a difference in here. And I'll go ahead and run it. And in fact, it did go and correct these out now that it was 2 feet. Again, just to undo and then bring it back to, then it went and corrected them out. So this maximum allowable offset is something, if you're going to be using this tool, you want to go and experiment with it. Every data set will have different settings. So you want to start small and then looking to see if there's any larger areas where you might have issues. You know, for example, I might go into here and say, well, maybe that is supposed to be a curve. And I can go in here and say, maybe with 2 foot offset, that will replace it and it will fix some of that, but maybe not all of it. You can see that this now looks like this is a reverse here. So I may go and say, well, maybe that's too much for that. So it is sort of an iterative process in here. Not always something you can just batch run and walk away from. You do want to go and see if there's something, some sort of happy medium that you can go and get on here. If it turns out that, you know, you find things that don't get converted correctly with this, and I'm looking for something here. This is it's another area here. So you get something like this where it's got some very strange vertices that were created in here. We would then go to my next tool that we'll often use, and that's the Align Features tool. One of my favorite tools here. Let's go to Edit, start editing, go to Edit, and go to Align Features. Sorry. Go to the Align Features tool. The Align Features tool has the ability to go search not just your current features, but also go in and search for any visible feature that's allowable and editable to be changed. And the way it works is that you basically draw a path, and then it will analyze and take every single one of the vertices that lie within the tolerance that's associated with that path and go and move them and replace that geometry that's included in there with this new angular geometry. And let me go and do that. just so you can see it. This is now a curve, a true geometric curve, rather than what it was before. Again, this is one of the things that we might wind up doing to do some major cleanup in here. Maybe we have a curve here, and we'll go and clean those up. And then if we have, this is sort of one-on-one here, we might have some internal vertices that we want to clean up. So some of this can be batched, some of this cannot be batched. It really comes down to the individual data and quality of the data on here. All right. Do we have any questions yet, Chris?
None at the moment.
Okay. So let's also go and show how we can use this align features to go and clean up a curve if in fact we missed it somehow, or it didn't get caught when we ran the simplify features on here. So again, this is just, it's taking the vertices and removing any excess vertices on here. It's going and cleaning this data up and making it cleaner data and replacing all these individual lines in here with a curve. Again, depending upon my data, I might say, again, I might use the simplified curve here, or I might use the align features tool to go and do it. It just depends upon what it looks like, what type of system is set up here. All right. So it's a combination of those two, but it's about removing excessive vertices that are located, it's located on your data. And that those excessive vertices don't necessarily have to be just on a curve. It can in fact be points along the lines that are caused by, again, either caused by extends or caused by topology intersect when you're going and validating the topology. All right, I'm going to leave it like this. I'm going to do a save on this data set. Again, just to sort of verify, this is 14,650. But that brings us to the next thing that I'm going to be looking for if I'm looking to go and sort of verify my data. The next thing that I'll do is I'll go all the way down to my shape area field. I'm looking at this here. There's a lot of attribution on here. All right, my shape area field. And I will sort it so that I can sort ascending. The reason why I do this is I'm looking for really tiny slivers. And here, this is 0.01 square feet. And by the way, with ArcGIS Pro interface now that I've gone and selected something, I can click here and actually go and zoom all the way to that automatically. So when I'm looking at this, I can look in here and see, well, what is this thing? What's the attribution on here? And it turns out that it actually has a parcel number. I'm not sure that's correct. So I'm going to pick all three of these, and I can see that there's the sliver. Here's here's the sliver. Let's go down to here. Look all the way on the bottom. The shape area, this is a 691,000 square feet. This is 0. So it looks like this parcel here is where this is supposed to go, and it looks like it's a sliver associated with that. There's a couple ways of solving this. Let's look at the northern end here and see if there's something indicating what's going on here. We can't zoom in close enough there. Looks like we probably will not be able to zoom in close enough here. It looks like there is there's an extra vertex here. Here, that was just pulled away and caused there to be this little parcel inside of here. A couple ways I could fix that. Normally your topology will say you fix this and you then merge them back and forth between. I can do that. I can select this and then select this parcel. So it's a straight parcel between here and do a merge between it. With these two, actually, I'm looking where I'm at here. This is a county boundary. So this is an extra parcel that's in here that's adjacent to the county boundary. I can do a merge between these two. So let me go to my edit, do a merge. Here's the small one, here's the big one. I can go and tell it to go ahead and merge it, the two in there to create that sliver. When I do that, it actually disappears. Let me go to my next parcel that's selected. And in fact, this looks like there's some sort of a misalignment that's gone on within this one parcel. Right, and you can see that there's a sliver here. That's not a parcel. There's a space here. Let's go and measure that distance. 1/16 of a foot. So I suspect that this was a mapping error where somebody had not recognized that they actually had a parcel selected and they moved it without realizing it. So what I would often do is I would do that align features again. It doesn't have to be 5 feet. I might make it 1 foot, or let's make it 2 feet just in case. And I would tell it to start here and then make sure I can get to here and then go back to here and let it go and clean them all up. In this case, I'm going to go to here and look at what that's done here. Let me make sure I've got this correctly. I've got one parcel here, one parcel here, and then I've got this parcel here. Looks like there's also an overlap in here. This parcel I would probably delete just to make sure that's a county boundary here. And I would probably delete that. So these types of slivers appear, again, all sorts of different reasons. Most of it is mapping problems where you may have gone in and mapped something, or somebody may not have been aware that they actually had gone and moved a vertex or combined something together. No parcel number, nothing here, there. Yeah, I think this is a sliver that was created. on here. So I'll go ahead and delete this. So utilizing the shape area field, you can go and identify very, very small parcels very quickly and utilize that sometimes other than on here. So this is a sliver where this parcel looks good, this parcel looks good, but there's a sliver parcel right there that's not a valid parcel at all. So I might go ahead and delete that. I can also look here. What is this here? I've got a gap between there. Let's go and put some color back in here. Let's turn this back on so we can see it. And we can see that there's a gap here. If I look here, it looks there's probably a gap here also. And another way that we might do this, I'm going to go back to using my align features. I'm going to draw from here to here, to here, to here, and tell it to go and align them all up, and it will line them up and remove any of those gaps or overlaps on there for it. Let's go ahead and save this again. Edit and save. All right, this again here. And I start going through until I get to the smallest parcel that I think is valid in here. Most of these small parcels like this actually looks like that's a square. Actually looks like it has its own parcel ID. .01, yeah. It has its own parcel ID. So that looks like that is a valid parcel. Again, without knowing everything about this data, I might go and measure it and just show me that this is 2.4 feet by, wow, this is tiny. I wonder if that is a mistake on here. Again, without knowing the data or getting more background on here, I can't look at it, but it's something that always throws up a flag when I have something that small in here, on here. So you can, again, you can see how far this goes. This is 0.38 square feet, a half of a square foot here. This is one of those where it's along a roadway and there's some sort of a clip here. I suspect this is probably supposed to go together. These have the same parcel number here. So this is a merge to go and clean this up. Let's go with this big one here and merge them into there. This isn't sexy, this isn't fancy, but this is something that has to be done because all of this data, all these small little parcels, all these slivers, you have to go and clean them up. You want to go and periodically check to see whether you still have them in there or not. All right. Any questions on here? By the way, while we're doing this, let's look at this and let's do an edit vertices on here, because a question I'm sure it hasn't popped up yet, but well, how do I remove these vertices? And I'm going to use the edit vertices tool and just sort of go over this and say, go ahead and remove these. Let's use this edit vertices tool against this. Now with ArcGIS Pro, the tools over here for edit vertices basically use lassos instead of the the way they did it in ArcMap. So you just want to get used to that. It is a slightly different way of dealing with that, but once you get used to it, it's actually fairly easy to go and utilize.
You can also just right click on the vertice and click delete vertice if you don't like the lasso. So
Thank you. Thank you. You're right. It just depends upon how many you have in there as far as how quickly that is to go and do that.
of course.
Yep. But the good point, Chris. Thank you. All right. So that's again, and I'll bet if you go in there and look at your data, you'll find little things like this all over the place. This is again a little bitty, and I'm not picking on this county. This is just knowing the way this data often comes in, especially as this is supposedly a new parcel here. What does this look like? We have this one. We have this one. Different, new, same owner, but a different parcel. I would really question whether that's a valid parcel or not on here. This parcel is yeah. It's not even a full square foot. All right. I'm not going to go and edit that out. So little things like that. You want to look at the geometries that are stored. By the way, the more you look at this, the more you realize, look at, there's a gap here between these two. So I'm again going to go and go to align features. I can tell you that I wind up going and spending an unbelievable amount of time making sure that all of these gaps and overlaps are taken care of when we're going and looking at somebody's data and cleaning up for inclusion within a parcel fabric. Because that will make a difference in the quality of the data that comes in and how it reacts from that point forward. Again, we'll show you another way to go and clean up vertices is with this align features tool. It will actually go and remove interim vertices for you and clean up that data also. So I'll do it with this one also, where I'll click on here, then I'll click on here, and you'll see that when I tell it to align this, it will automatically replace whatever features were there. It will replace them with one single straight feature instead. All right. Any questions on that or any questions on the geometry changes that occur? We looked at repair geometry, which we did it batch against the entire feature class. We showed you how to go and display the vertices so that you can look at what's making up where all the vertices are located on there. We looked at the simplify by straight lines and circular arcs. Love that tool. It's a great tool for cleaning up the geometries of your data. Then we looked at how we can use the shape area to audit and to make some assumptions about slivers and see if we can identify slivers on there by looking at these very small areas and seeing if they're valid or not. By the way, you might consider what is the smallest area that you're actually mapping in here. Is it 3 square feet or what is it? What is the smallest area? And you can see there's one here. There's another one here that might have to be cleaned up. You'd be surprised how much there is in your data. And this is in everybody's data. It looks like this. So I wouldn't take it personally. And then finally, we looked at how we can use the align features tool to go and realign or reset those geometries so that it removes some of those issues with them. All right.
There's a question in the chat.
Yes.
For the fixes in the parcel fabric, should no topology be selected? It's a good question.
So let me go and talk about that for a minute. Again, because the data set we had is not a parcel fabric. But when you have topology turned on, what it's going to do is if in fact, and I'll illustrate this with this. So if I were to go and do an align features here, all right, here. When I do an align features here with no topology turned on, because I have no rule-based topology, I only have no topology or map topology available in here. If I have a rule-based topology on here, it will tell me that if I run this and it goes to delete a feature because it no longer fits in there, because of this. For example, in here, this little triangle that's here, that's going to get deleted. And the other one's going to replace it. Go and show you, all right? If I have topology on here with topology with rules on here, it would give me an error on here and say, can't do that because you're going to delete either lines or you're going to delete polygons on here. So the answer to the question is it depends. It depends on whether you're really doing cleanup on here, what's commonly referred to as quality driven on here. Let's make sure that that one did get cleaned up. I do have two parcels in here. Let me go and delete that. So in that case, it just overrode it. But if you have topology turned on, it will give you an error message saying that you're going to go and change the geometry of these to a point where some of those features are going to delete, and it will not let you do that. So if you're purely cleaning this up, as we can do here, let's go to modify, and let's just draw something and say here to here, and let's make sure that this thing is 10 feet wide. It's going to go and collapse that entire element here. All right. So if I look here, there is one parcel. It deleted the other parcel here. I'll show you, there's the other parcel. When I run the align features, it deleted it. Topology will throw up an error there and say you can't do this because you're going to delete something. So again, there is no yes or no. It depends on what you're doing. If you're cleaning things up and you know that either lines should be removed and deleted and replaced with new geometry, or those polygons should disappear, you can run it with no topology in the parcel fabric. Interestingly, what the parcel fabric will be doing is, again, the align features works against vertices so that it moves vertices on here. So it's going to move any points. It's going to reconfigure any lines to match that path. And it's going to reconfigure any polygons associated with it. So since the parcel fabric is primarily vertex based, where it goes and uses topology, it should be fine. I would always run a build extent just to make sure, to see if there was something there that was different. I would just be careful running it on a parcel fabric and just recognize what you're doing in there. All right, it's a good question though. I would recognize what you're doing in there. So let's start talking about attribution cleanups. So in here, the one tool I really want to demonstrate is the data engineering tool. So in here, we have, let's go in and get rid of this. Let's go back over here. Show you real simply a couple of things that you can do. So with this tool, with data engineering, And let's get rid of this here. Data engineering allows me to go and analyze, statistically analyze a set of attribute fields within here. So if I select these fields, I right click on them and say, add to statistics and calculate. It will calculate things such as how many it is, what the count is of what I have in this. Let's go and move over here a little bit. So it calculates the count of how many parcels I have. It calculates, and this is basically the frequency. It calculates the median, standard deviation, mean, max, minimum of any number fields. And this is a double field here. On text fields, it tells me whether or not I have any null values. And so the reason why we do this is I can determine whether or not, for example, I have an attribute field that's being used or whether it has a whole series of null values on here. And one of the things that I absolutely love, and one of the things that Esri has done remarkably well with this, is that I can take any of these fields, number of unique values, any of these fields, and if I click on it and right click and say select all of these values, it will go and automatically select for me those records that have those values on here. So if I open up my attribute table, I have 4 records. I have 4 records here. And if I go to my selected records, here's my 4 records. All right, here's the 4 records in here. And I can see that I have valid parcel IDs, but I don't have any parcel numbers in here. So I can real quickly go in here and say, well, go ahead and calculate this so that the parcel nodes are equal to the parcel IDs, and say, go ahead and apply this. And it will allow me to go and fill in values that are missing in here. So when I go and I can close this out now, I can clear my selection. I probably should have clear my selection in here. And I can tell it to rerun again this statistics, and it shows me now I have every single record has a value in there for the parcel no field. I don't want to go in there a whole deep, but that's one of the things that it can do, is it can go in and analyze and show you and give you a good extent of where you have missing attribute fields on here. Again, that's about all I want to do with the attributes, but that's a very powerful tool, because you can take and select all of your attributes and see which ones have values, which ones don't have values on a numeric standpoint, whether or not you have outliers, things that are outside the normal range. You can look, for example, if you have something that appears quite a bit, a mode, you can select those all and figure out whether they're valid values or not. Data engineering is a really great tool for any sort of data cleanup. So let's look at topology cleanups finally. Topology cleanups, again, topology is going to take the geometries and compare them to one another. So most cases with polygons, what you're going to look for is you're going to look for gaps or overlaps. So what you do is you create those topology rules, then you go and validate the topology rules, and then you go and individually clean them up. So let's cover real quickly. If I go in here, that's fine. Here, this is it. I can go in here and say, I can say here, create new topology on here and tell it to include this feature class, which is the only feature class in my feature data set, by the way, and include that in there. And then I can add some rules, and I can say, let's go ahead and make this where the rule is that must not have gaps. And then finally, this same one where must not overlap. Simple. It creates the topology for me, builds this rule in here. Once it's built, I can go in here, and by right-clicking on it, I can say, validate this topology. Again, this is 15,000 parcels, rather small county, but it will go and run through and check every one of these parcels and see how they relate to one another. I can then go and add that topology to my current map. And what this will give me is this will go and show me in red. So here's point errors. I don't have any point rules on here, so I don't have anything there. Line errors, I don't have any line rules. So we can get rid of both of those. I'll use line errors. There's the gap error here. Here's the polygon errors for overlaps. So this will allow me to go and see, for example, if I go to my edit, I look my error inspector. As I zoom in here, it automatically will look at and show me all the errors in my current map extent. In this case, as I zoom out, it shows you all these errors on here as I'm zooming and moving around. Let's go and find, I thought I saw something here. There it is here. Here's an error on here, and it says must not overlap. All right. So within the error inspector, by the way, this is, you can have it on the map extent. You can see all of them. You can validate for the topology. When I have this one here, I can see a preview of it. When I click on it, it turns in yellow. If I look at the details, it will tell me what the error is. And if I click on fixed, it allows me to go and provide what it suggests as the possible fixes in here. So the fixes for an overlap is that it can take and create a new feature just for that overlap, taking it out of the two parcels that it both appeared in. So it could create a new feature. I don't want to do that here. I could merge them, in which case it would ask me which of these two parcels to merge it into, or I can remove that overlap. In this case, I want to go and merge it. All right. And it will say, which of these two do you want to merge it into, this big one or the little one? I'm going to merge it into the big one and say, go ahead and merge it. And notice that error disappears from it. So let's go and filter, and let's just show must-have overlaps on here and not here. Let's do all the overlaps that are in here. So this has 970 overlaps on here. By the way, that's probably a gap, or excuse me, yeah. Looking at here, this is, yes, a gap in between here. So we still have to look at those. So the overlaps, you're still going to have to look at them and go in here to each of them. You go in here, you can right click and zoom into this one and say, okay, well, what do you want to do with this now? And again, I can say merge this and it will go and pop this up. Unfortunately, the way this is either it'll merge it into this one or this one. I'm going to merge it into there. All right, so it appears there. So one by one, you can go and do this. If I go and filter this so that it shows me the gaps on here, let's go and zoom into this gap here. This is a road right away. This is not an error. This is an exception. I could just mark that as an exception, and it will appear as an exception here in green. So all of these roads, that's another exception. I could just mark that as an exception on here, and it's no longer appearing as an error on here. Let me go and see if I can find an actual gap on here. This looks like a gap here. Yeah, this is a gap, isn't it? That's a huge gap. So I'm going to go in and look at this one more time, and I'm going to actually close out my error inspector, turn off these, and show you one last fix before we do anything else. This is this parcel. This parcel, somebody went and selected it in ArcMap and dragged their cursor and moved it and misplaced it. There is a tool, and by the way, let's change this appearance a little bit so that we can see it a little bit better. It looks like they did cut that out completely on here. So there's a tool called a transform tool. Okay, let me see. Transform tool. All right, the transform tool is going to allow me to create linkages and say, I thought I just not clip. Sorry, transform. And I could actually create links. Say that's supposed to go over here. This is supposed to go over here. This, and I'm just supposed to go over to that point there. And depending on whether or not I have topology on here, I'm going to turn off topology and tell it to just move my selected feature so that it corresponds to those links on here. And I can choose several methods to do this: an affine transformation, similarity transformation, rubber sheeting, or rubber sheeting linear, rubber sheeting nearest neighbor. Let's just try similarity right now and tell it to transform. And it will go and move that parcel, keeping the same shape, and move it in there. And when I go in here and notice, it was overlapping on top of the other one. So I now have contiguity there, and it moved the parcel correctly. So Chris, I noticed there was a question here. Is the transform tool the upgraded version of the transform parcels tool? So that's a reference to ArcMap Parcel Fabric. And in the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, the transform parcel tool actually is a misnomer. It's really not the same as this transform tool. The transform parcel tool, what it actually does is it goes and takes and moves points. And because of the way the parcel fabric is structured, as you move a point, the lines associated with that point are also moved, and the polygons are also moved. Well, that sort of element in here, that's the same as doing this inside of, let's go and take this point and transform. Well, actually, I don't have points here, do I? So it'd be the same as going and taking a point, and if there was a point here and moving that so it would join to that, that's really a topology type of change. This, however, and it seems kind of the same, where I'm going to tell it, okay, put that here, put this here. I am going to select this one just so it goes and does that. And then I'm going to go around here and I say, take this one to here. Let's go to the other end of this. And I'll bet there's actually a point here. Huh, there is something there. So So Sean, there's a lot of similarity in here, but there's some differences also. It's not exactly the same, but it is, you could consider this an upgrade of that transform tool. Yeah, and you can see that it moves everything in that same type of thing. So on the back end, you think, oh, this is the same. Sean, let me ask you a question here. Have you used the ArcGIS parcel fabric much at all? Thanks. A lot. Okay, so let me go and share with you a secret then. The Align Parcels tool. The Align Parcels tool, in which you go and have your selected parcel, and then you tell it links, and then you tell it how to go and handle all of these points to lines elements on there. The Align Parcels tool is actually a combination of the Transform tool and the Align Features tool. So that's really that Align Parcels tool. That's it. What this is actually doing, it's doing a transform for the points, and then it's using the Align Features to make sure that what used to be called line points now are consistent as you go along those lines. All right, so we've taken up a whole hour now. Are there any other questions on here that we might want to cover? All right, so thank you all for coming, and let's go ahead and we will stop the recording. See you next time. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.